no. I said, what does your mother eat? She said, what difference does that make? I said,
Yeah.
no, it does make difference. I said, what does your mother eat? She
Yeah.
said, well, she doesn't eat beef.
Okay.
She eats chicken. I said, oh, grand.
Oh.
I said, does she eat chicken a couple times a week? And she said,
Mhm.
yes. I said, your mother is responsible for more than 60 chicken deaths a year. Is it okay to use violence against your mother?
Wow. Yeah.
And you know, the reality is, the idea that we're going to ever solve the problem of animal exploitation through violence is, in addition to morally objectionable, is profoundly stupid.
Yeah.
That's never going to work.
Right.
And so those are the
what works? Education?
Oh God, that's the only thing that works. So Nelson Mandela said, and he was dead right, that education is the most important
Yeah.
weapon that we have,
Yeah.
and that's what you have to do. You have to educate people.
Right.
And you know, I think you know, the world is in a. I believe, perhaps naively, but I believe it, and I will die believing it, that
Mhm.
everyone has a sort of a spark of divinity, and
Yes.
and that people want to, most people want to be good.
Right.
They want to live a moral life.
Yes.
We confuse them as to what that means, because we live in a corrupt, corrosive culture that
Right.
that teaches people that materialism, that what matters is what toys they have, and you know
Yeah.
where they live, and their houses and their cars and their money and stuff like that.
I mean, most of us, when we're walking, we're
Yeah.
driving, and the mother duck has the babies,
Right.
we all stop the car and let them pass.
Mm-hmm.
We all do this. None of us say, oh, let's run them over and take them home and eat them and cook them. And so I think we all have that compassion in our heart, but society makes it that this is so natural and normal and necessary that we need to be eating animals.
Well, you know, I just wrote an essay a couple of days ago that was published on Medium.com, and I took the position. I said, look, most people believe that it's wrong to inflict unnecessary suffering on animals.
Yes.
Well, however you define necessity, it's got to exclude inflicting suffering and death for reasons of pleasure.
Right.
Okay, that's why we get upset when you know Michael Vick gets arrested for having a dogfighting ring,
Yeah.
or that's why we get upset when you know people do harmful things to animals. We get upset. That's
Yes.
why we stop the car when the baby ducks
Yeah. Across the street.
across the street. And today when I was coming down here, there were some deer on the road, and you know, I stopped the car. Everyone had stopped their car, and so I stopped the car and
Yeah.
got out and sort of got them to get off of the road,
Yeah.
because no one else seemed
To care.
well, no one seemed to know what to do.
Oh, okay.
And you know, it's easy. You just sort of move them,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
and they run from you. And so, but the reason why people care about animals is because nobody thinks that it's a good idea to inflict suffering on animals for transparently frivolous reasons.
Right.
Yet eating them, wearing them, using the only thing that we do
Mm-hmm.
with animals that isn't transparently frivolous is the use of animals to find cures for serious human illnesses. I don't agree with that. I think
don't
that's
either.
wrong.
I
But
don't-
at least
yeah.
that requires a discussion.
Yeah.
You need to talk about that. You need to that requires a bit more nuanced discussion. The rest of it, all you have to do is agree that it's wrong to inflict unnecessary suffering, and that means 99.99999%
Right.
sort of goes out the window.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, and also, you know, think about it. When Michael Vick gets arrested for dogfighting,
Right.
we don't say, well, the solution is to have more humane dogfighting. We say you shouldn't
Yeah.
be using the animals at all. In
That's right,
Well,
period.
but yet the movement, the animal movement in this country and in Britain and in South America and in virtually every place else is a business that promotes what I call happy exploitation.
Right.
And, you know, it sort of promotes this idea that, well, you know, we ought to encourage people to be more compassionate. And the answer is, I think that's nonsense.
Yeah.
And what you're doing is you're telling people, well, you know what, if you're a reducitarian and you eat like one less meal a week, you're a good person. And if you eat cage-free eggs, you're a good person. And the answer is, look, I'm not interested in judging people. I'm not a
Or
priest.
what about, how do you feel about this meatless Mondays?
I think it's nonsense. I mean,
Yeah.
can you imagine, like, sort of think about it for a second? I mean, rape is a major problem.
Yeah.
Even though it's against the law, it happens all the time.
Right.
And in this country, in the United States, 1 out of 4 women who gets to be 22 years of age will have either been a victim of attempted rape or raped.
Right.
All right, so it's a serious problem, and it's a serious problem all over the world. Let's
Yeah.
let's have Rape-Free Monday. You know,
Exactly.
I mean, it's like, come
Exactly.
on, come on. you
Give
know?
us a scenario you say about the slaves. I love how you say about that.
Well, I mean, it's
If
always
you're going
better
to beat your
if you're
slave 9 days a week.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, it's like, well, it's better to beat your slave 10 times a week than 11 times a week, but
Yeah.
it doesn't answer the question about the morality of slavery
Right.
as an institution.
What is the difference between animal rights and human rights?
Well, humans have, I argue that animals have one basic right, the right not to be regarded as property. But that means basically you've got to get rid of domestication.
Right.
So if you observe that one right, then
Yeah.
you stop bringing domesticated animals into existence for human use. But I mean, humans have other rights. They have rights to vote. They have rights to drive. We have secondary rights.
Right.
But I think it's interesting. As much as we disagree on, I don't mean you and me. I'm saying
Yeah.
as much as humans disagree on rights, what rights
Yeah.
exist. The bottom line is that we all agree that slavery is bad.
Right.
And because we all agree that if you take a human being and you say this is a piece of property, then that human being is outside of the moral community altogether.
Right.
Because to be property means you only have extrinsic or economic value, not intrinsic or
Right.
intrinsic or internal value. And so we all recognize, whether we agree, whether we think that we should have socialized medicine, or whether we agree with capitalism, or whether we agree with whatever other, whatever rights we talk about, we all agree that every human being, irrespective of how smart or not smart or beautiful or not beautiful, whatever, should not be treated as property, as chattel property.
Right.
And what I argue is that because we recognize that not being property is the very minimum you have to be a member of the moral community. Well, the same thing exists for non-human animals.
Right.
If they're going to matter, they can't be property. If they're not going to be property, then we've just pulled the rug out from the various forms of institutionalized exploitation, all of which rely on the fact that animals are property.
Right.
And so if you say they've got a right not to be property, that means that you have to stop bringing domesticated animals into existence. You can't eat them, wear them, use them. And as I say, and you can't use them for vivisection.
Right.
In the same way that you can't use human beings who have whatever defect you think animals have that allows you to use them for vivisection.
Right.
There are going to be some group of humans. If you say, well, humans can't, non-humans can't reason, they can't think, they can't use concepts. I mean, whether that's true or not is a different matter. But assuming it is true, there are humans who can't think rationally, can't use concepts. We would never use them in biomedical experiments.
Right.
And we don't think it's okay to exploit humans who are not intelligent or who can't think or reason. Indeed, and some of them get to be fairly high government people. And so
I love how you say that if animals are aware, that means they're sentient, then they morally matter. And if they morally matter, we have a moral obligation not to use them.
There's this idea that if you go back to the 19th century when the animal welfare standard developed, and it's carried through, I mean, Peter Singer takes the same position. The idea was that animals matter because they can suffer. But they're not like us because they're not self-aware. So that if we kill them painlessly, you're not really harming them because they don't really have, they're not forward-looking beings. You're not harming them because they don't know what they lose when you kill them. And that's an idea that Jeremy Bentham had in the early 1800s. It was the foundation. It was part of the thinking that was the foundation of the animal welfare position. And it's what Peter Singer maintains now. And Peter Singer basically says, look, if chickens can't, if they're not self-aware, then as long as you give them a reasonably pleasant life and a relatively painless death, and you replace them with an equally happy animal, you haven't really harmed them.
Yeah.
And so this is the basis of the animal movement.
Yeah.
I'm actually at the present time I'm writing an essay on the early history of the animal rights movement, going back to Britain in the 1960s.
Wow.
And it's really interesting because there were some people there, particularly a woman named Bridget Brophy, who is now dead. But Brophy had this idea that she had a real true idea of animal rights.
Okay.
What happened was that for a variety of reasons, not the least of which Bridget Brophy was a woman, and we tend to sort of we tend to actually knowledge is genderized, and women's contributions get marginalized, and what ended up happening was the movement ended up being sort of led by Peter Singer, who then gets called the father of the animal rights movement. Well, Peter Singer's a utilitarian and rejects rights altogether as a philosophical matter. And he's very much into this idea of happy exploitation, that what you want to do is sort of make sure that animals have a reasonably pleasant life and a relatively painless death. And so he's opposed to factory farming and things, but what he's done is he's created a blueprint for all of these groups, from PETA to Mercy for Animals, to all these groups are basically promoting some version of happy exploitation. And to the extent that they even promote veganism, they promote veganism as a way of reducing suffering, not as a way of a necessary component of justice. And that's how I see it. I mean, I have not knowingly eaten an animal product and going on 37 years. And you know what? It ain't hard.
Right.
And it was a whole lot harder back then, but it's very easy.
Right. I mean, back then there was nothing, and you still...
Exactly.
And Dr. Francione, even when I went vegan, it wasn't like I did it gradually. It just was overnight. I could not...
Absolutely.
I don't want to be a part of it, and I can't do it.
Yeah. No. And people say, well, but what about our addiction to cheese and things like that?
Oh,
the answer is, please give me a break. I mean, did I miss cheese when I stopped eating? Because I became a vegetarian first, but the problem is you become a vegetarian first, and then I sort of ramped up on eggs and ice cream and dairy, which involves every bit as much suffering and death as meat does.
Right.
And so then when I became a vegan, did I miss cheese for a while? And the answer is, well, yeah, I did. Would I consider it to be an addiction?